No one talks about how hard it is to love someone in silence. Not because it's dramatic, not because it's impossible to survive, but because it's the kind of pain that doesn't leave visible scars. It becomes something you carry so quietly that even the people closest to you never realize how heavy it's become. People talk about heartbreak after relationships end. They talk about betrayal, breakups, and learning to love again. But almost no one talks about grieving a love that never really had the chance to exist. A love that lived almost entirely inside your own heart. There's something uniquely lonely about caring so deeply for someone who never truly knew the depth of what they meant to you. You convince yourself that maybe one more conversation will be the moment. Maybe one more laugh together. Maybe one more memory. Maybe one more chance. But maybe is a dangerous place to build a home. It keeps you waiting long after life has quietly started asking you to move forward. You become fluent in silence. You learn how to smile when they're around while your heart is saying everything your mouth refuses to. You memorize the little details they probably don't even realize they're leaving behind. The way they laugh when something genuinely surprises them. The way their eyes soften when they talk about something they love. The phrases they always repeat without noticing. Your heart begins collecting pieces of someone who never asked to be held so closely. And somehow, every little thing starts feeling important. A song becomes theirs. A street becomes theirs. A season becomes theirs. Even ordinary moments begin carrying extraordinary weight because your mind has quietly woven them into every corner of your world. The strange thing about loving someone silently is that nobody tells you how imaginative your heart becomes. You don't just remember what happened. You begin imagining everything that could have. What if I had said something that day? What if I had stayed a little longer? What if they were waiting for me to make the first move? What if I misunderstood everything? Those questions become a soundtrack playing beneath your everyday life. You can be laughing with friends, sitting at work, driving home, making dinner, and underneath all of it, your mind quietly returns to the same unfinished conversation that never actually happened. It's exhausting. Not because you're trying to hold on to them, but because your heart doesn't seem to understand that there is nothing left to hold. People often think moving on is a decision, as if one morning you simply wake up, stretch, and decide today is the day you'll finally stop thinking about them. If only healing worked that way. Most of the time, that moving on feels less like walking away and more like untangling yourself from thousands of invisible threads. Some days you feel free. Other days, one tiny reminder pulls every thread tight again. A familiar perfume. A photo someone else posts. A place you accidentally drive past. A sentence that sounds exactly like something they would have said. And suddenly your heart is standing in yesterday while your body is trying to live in today. You tell yourself you're making progress. And you are. Healing isn't linear, no matter how much we'd like it to be. Sometimes growth looks like not checking their profile for weeks. Sometimes it looks like catching yourself before reaching for your phone. Sometimes it simply looks like allowing yourself to cry without judging yourself for still caring. Because caring isn't weakness. It never was. Love isn't embarrassing, even when it remains unspoken, even when it isn't returned, even when it never becomes the story you hoped it would. What hurts isn't loving someone. What hurts is having nowhere for that love to go. It's waking up with words you'll never send. It's hearing good news and instinctively wanting to tell them first. It's seeing something beautiful and wondering if they would have smiled the same way you did. It's carrying someone with you through moments they'll never even know they were part of. And eventually something else begins to happen. You stop missing only the person. You start missing the version of yourself that existed when hope still felt possible. Because hope changes the way the world looks. It makes ordinary Tuesdays feel like they might become unforgettable. It makes every notification feel exciting. It makes your future feel open, unfinished, full of possibility. Then one day you slowly realize you've been grieving two different things all along: the person and the future you quietly imagined beside them. That imagined future can be harder to release than reality itself, because reality has edges. Reality gives you facts, but imagination is endless. Your heart keeps writing chapters that life never agreed to publish. You picture holidays that never happened, conversations you'll never have, growing older together, meeting each other's families, inside jokes that only existed in your imagination. 1,000 tiny moments that felt real simply because you believed in them so deeply. And letting go of those imagined memories can feel just as painful as letting go of real ones. Sometimes even more painful, because there is no photograph to put away, no anniversary to mark, no official ending. Just a quiet understanding that something beautiful lived inside you, even if it never fully existed anywhere else. That kind of grief often feels invisible. People expect you to be okay because from the outside, nothing happened. But everything happened, at least inside you. And sometimes that's where the deepest losses live. You start wondering if you're taking too long, if everyone else heals faster, if something is wrong with you because months or maybe years have passed and they still wander into your thoughts without permission. But healing isn't measured by how often someone crosses your mind. It's measured by what happens when they do. At first, every thought feels like a wave that knocks the air from your lungs. Eventually, it becomes a ripple. Still there, still real, but no longer capable of pulling you under. That change is so gradual you rarely notice it's happening. One day you'll laugh without thinking of them afterward. You'll hear their favorite song and finish it without skipping. You'll visit the place that once belonged entirely to your memories of them and discover it belongs to you again. Not because you've forgotten, but because you've slowly reclaimed the parts of yourself that grief borrowed. Maybe that's what healing has been all along. Not forgetting someone, not pretending they never mattered, but remembering them without abandoning yourself in the process. Maybe that's what healing has been all along. Not forgetting someone, not pretending they never mattered, but remembering them without abandoning yourself in the process. Because somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, you stopped being the main character in your own life. Your days became measured by whether they replied. Your mood depended on whether they looked at you a certain way. Your hope grew from the smallest gestures, and your disappointment arrived just as quietly. You weren't living your own story anymore. You were living inside the possibility of theirs. And that's what silent love does. It teaches you how to wait. You wait for the right moment, the right conversation, the right sign, the right version of yourself that finally feels worthy enough to tell them how you feel. But life has a way of reminding us that there is no perfect moment, only moments we either step into or watch pass by. Sometimes I wonder how many people are carrying words they'll never say. How many I love yous are sitting quietly inside someone's chest because fear convinced them silence was safer than honesty. Fear has a gentle voice. It rarely sounds dramatic. It whispers things like, what if they don't feel the same? What if you ruin the friendship? What if they walk away completely? What if you're imagining everything? So instead, you choose certainty over possibility. The certainty of never knowing. Because somehow that feels easier than risking an answer you might not survive. But the strange thing is, not knowing has its own kind of heartbreak. It stretches across months, sometimes years. It fills empty spaces with assumptions. It turns ordinary memories into evidence. You start analyzing every smile, every glance, every conversation. Did they hold eye contact a little longer? Did that compliment mean something? Were they just being kind? Did I miss my chance? Your mind becomes a detective searching for clues in moments that were never meant to be investigated. And it's exhausting, because you'll never solve a mystery built entirely from imagination. There comes a point where you realize you haven't just been missing them, you've been missing the answers. Closure has a way of becoming mythical. We imagine it as one perfect conversation where everything suddenly makes sense, where every question is answered, every feeling explained, every loose end tied together. But life rarely offers endings that neat. Sometimes closure isn't something another person gives you. Sometimes it's something you slowly build yourself. Brick by brick. Choice by choice. You stop asking why they didn't choose you. You start asking why you've spent so long believing your worth depended on being chosen at all. That's not an easy question. Because if you're honest, a part of you probably believed that if they loved you back, everything inside you would finally settle. You'd finally feel enough. Enough to stop questioning yourself. Enough to stop comparing yourself. Enough to believe you deserved happiness. But another person's love was never meant to carry that weight. No human being could. And maybe that's one of the hardest lessons love ever teaches us. Sometimes the person you're waiting for isn't coming to rescue you from loneliness. They're simply revealing the places where you've forgotten how to stay close to yourself. It's strange how grief changes over time. At first it feels loud, every thought hurts, every reminder stings. You wonder how something that never officially began could leave such a permanent ache. Then, little by little, the volume changes. It doesn't disappear, it just becomes quieter. Instead of thinking about them every hour, almost it's every few days, then once a week, then only when something unexpectedly reminds you. A certain sunset, the smell of rain, a cafe you forgot existed, a stranger with a familiar laugh. For a moment, your heart pauses. Not because you're back at the beginning, but because healing never erases what was meaningful. It simply teaches your memories how to exist without controlling you. There's a version of you that still believes they'll come back. Maybe not literally. Maybe you don't actually expect a message to appear. But somewhere deep inside, there's still a tiny room that hasn't packed away hope. It's beautifully human. Hope doesn't leave all at once. It folds itself smaller and smaller until one day you realize it no longer fills the whole house. Just one quiet corner. And even then, some days you'll walk past that corner and feel its presence. Not because you want to go backwards, but because you remember who you were when that hope was alive. Sometimes we mistake healing for becoming someone who no longer cares. But I don't think that's true. I think healing looks more like becoming someone who can care without losing themselves. Someone who can say, that mattered. That changed me. I'll probably always remember them. And I'm still allowed to keep living. There is no betrayal in moving forward. There's no disloyalty in finding joy again. You are not replacing the love you felt. You're expanding beyond the space where that love once kept you standing still. For so long, you've treated your heart like a museum. Every memory carefully preserved, every feeling protected behind invisible glass. You visited the same exhibits every day. The first conversation, the almost confession, the look that made your heart race, the goodbye that didn't seem important until later. You walked those halls so many times you knew every detail by heart. But museums are places we visit. They're not places we're meant to live. At some point, the doors have to open. Fresh air has to come in. New memories have to find somewhere to belong. Not because the old ones weren't beautiful, but because your heart deserves more than becoming an archive of what almost happened. It deserves laughter that doesn't remind you of someone else. Conversations that don't make you compare. Moments that belong completely to the present. You deserve to wake up one morning and realize the first thing on your mind is your own life, your own dreams, your own future. Not because you've erased them, but because you've remembered yourself. And maybe that's the quiet miracle no one talks about. Not that the pain disappears, but that one day, your own life starts sounding louder than the echo of the one you imagined.